In this episode, I am going to be reviewing The Learning Tree from 1969, which was written and directed by Gordon Parks, and it was also adopted by his own novel, The Learning Tree. I only first heard of Gordon Parks about 4 years ago as a major John Cassavetes fan, as all of you who follow my channel will definitely know. I was reading a biography on him called Accidental Genius by Marshall Fine, which I had had for a number of years and had never read. And there was a chapter about different filmmakers talking about how Cassavetes helped them. And one of the parts of the book is Gordon Parks talking about how Cassavetes helped him get the learning tree made. Cassavetes had been a fan of the book and also read the screenplay that Gordon Parks had wrote. And he said to Gordon, you should really direct this film. And Gordon Parks said, no major studio in Hollywood is going to let an African American direct a major motion picture. And Cassavetes, being someone who really couldn't accept something like that, arranged a meeting with the head of Warner Brothers Seven Arts. At that time, was a company, Seven Arts, that had merged with Warner Brothers, and he had arranged a meeting with the head of the studio and Gordon Parks, and within minutes, he gave Gordon Parks the green light to make the film. And Gordon, of course, was shocked. He had up until that point been a major photographer. He had made some documentaries. He had written some books, but he hadn't done any filmmaking in a narrative sense. And here he was given the opportunity to direct a major motion picture, which was huge. I mean, if you think at that time, this was the first time a black man ever directed a major motion picture for a major studio. And so he, as he said, he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that this was happening. And it's a wonderful film. I had never seen it before, and I've been meaning to see it. And now that it's been on the Criterion Channel again, it's kind of come and gone on the Criterion Channel. They've put it back on, and I watched it the other night, and I was just blown away. And this is essentially, a story of racism. It's a coming of age story, and it's about police brutality in this small town that takes place in Kansas. And Gordon Parks was from Kansas, so it very much was very autobiographical from his own coming of age experiences. But it follows a couple of young men. Newt is the main character, and he's a very kind, ambitious man. He has a good family life. This was something you really hadn't seen before in movies, particularly major motion pictures, where a black family just at home together, and having dinner together, and in loving quarters, and having, enjoying their lives and having strong parental figures. And he has a really, really great mother in this, who had a profound effect on him. And that was something that Gordon Parks said about his mother, that she was a strong, kind woman who really had a loving and positive effect on everyone in the family. But what's interesting is that you see the black people, even though they're in this segregated environment, and the minorities amongst all the white people, and some of them are not afraid to stand up for themselves. For example, there's a great scene where Newt gets a C or a C minus on a school paper, and he says to his teacher, I believe I deserved a better grade. Can you tell me why you only gave me a C? And she says, well, as a black person, you really shouldn't get your hopes up to ever want to go to college or get good grades, because it's not going to happen. And he can't accept that. He cannot accept that he's not going to go to college, because he, in his mind, is going to go to college, and he doesn't care what she thinks, and of course he's sent to the principal office. And there's a great scene that Newt has with the principal, which I'll get to later. But he will not accept that. And as a young man, he's kind of coming to grips with how much racism he's around, and things are happening as a result of blatant racism, which at his age, he's now really starting to realize, oh, this is happening because of this color of my skin. I'm sure he knew it even as a kid, but it's becoming clearer and clearer as he's has these ambitions to go to college, and people are saying, "Well, you can't do that because you're a black person," which is ridiculous. You also see that with the character Booker, who is a father, a single father of this young man Marcus. And there's, he's clearly very, very poor. He lives in a very small place that's sort of really not in good shape. And there's a scene later on where his son is sent to a prison for 6 months, and as he comes out and the police officer brings him home, he asks for Booker's signature that the son has been released, and of course he calls him boy. And Booker stands right up to him. He's like, "How old does a man have to be until he's not called boy anymore?" And as he says to his son, "I'm going to kill one of them one of these days." And that's something I'll get to later as well. But Booker is someone who's clearly been victim of, terrible, terrible inequality and hatred. And the interesting thing about him and his son is that they're very, very poor. Whereas Newt and his family they have certain advantages. They have a better house. They seem to be in a loving family, and his mother works for the main judge in the city that they live in. So you get the impression that they are better off. You don't know what his father does for a living, but the mother, as I said, works for the judge. And so they just have they have, even though they're both black, Newt is in a better position than Marcus, who has an abusive father. We see off the top, there's this tornado scene, and he's arguing with his father, and his father is very threatening towards him. So you get the impression that he was violent. And even as he comes out of jail, they don't have much to say to each other. Their interaction is very awkward, very, very distant. And early on in the film, this is one thing that when I was watching on the Criterion channel, they have these really great featurettes on this film with great interviews with Gordon Parks and some documentaries Gordon Parks made. And there was another featurette that Gordon Parks' son was on the set, and he made a documentary of his father making the film. And some of the people talking about the film were saying that, you see people's life change on a dime. Early in the film, all the kids are just having fun in a river, and to the corner, there's these guys doing, I imagine, some kind of illegal gambling game going on that one of these black guys are organizing. And then as Kirky, who's like the head sheriff in town, as he comes around and he basically is chasing this black guy. And I thought he was just going to arrest him, but the guy jumps into the river and boom, he shoots him dead cold. And it was just so casual, the way in which he did it. And they're trying to find the body. They can't find them. They give the kid some money to go and find the body under the river. And when they do, everyone's like celebrates, everyone applauds. And I'm thinking, what is it? Mainly the white people. And I'm thinking, what is this, a show? I just couldn't believe the casual nature of murder. It was just nothing. It was just an errand to this guy who's really quite an awful, awful person. But you see that they're experiencing this kind of violence and this kind of racism, and that's how it's shaping their lives. And obviously it shapes Marcus's life much worse than it does Newt, because Newt at least has a happier household, whereas Marcus doesn't. And, you see early on in the film, they all go and steal some apples from this tree, from this farmer. And as the farmer catches them, he's got this huge whip, and he catches Marcus and he starts hitting him with the whip. And Marcus manages to knock him down, and he hits him over the head a few times and knocks him out. Now, what happens is the farmer doesn't get any consequences to whipping this kid. But of course, Marcus gets sent to jail for 6 months because he knocked him out. Now, I'm not saying Marcus was right, because obviously he was stealing, and that doesn't mean that he can knock someone out even though he's getting hit. But surely there should have been some kind of consequences to the farmer who has this massive whip whipping this poor young kid, and nothing happens to him. I mean, Newt goes and works for him for free for stealing, apples from the tree. Wow, I was just so appalled by that. But I really wasn't surprised that, of course, the farmer, he faces no consequences whatsoever because he's white, and people just thought, well, you steal his apples, he can whip you if he wants to. Of course, there's an interesting analogy with the tree, and of course, the red apples really, really pop. Red is a color you see a lot in the film. I'll actually get to that in a little later in the video, but when he's talking to his mother, and his mother gives him this great advice, they're talking about death and Christianity, and Newt says, "Oh, I'm afraid to die. I don't ever want to die." And she says, "Well, you have to be prepared for it." And she goes, "And that means that you love when you feel like hating, and you tell the truth when you feel like lying." And that has a profound effect on Newt, because in the film, he's faced with these dilemmas where he can either lie, or or either tell the truth, and where he can also hate, but can he decide to love instead of hating? So these are dilemmas that come up, and choices that Newt makes. And the first one, in terms of telling the truth, is that he witnesses Booker, Marcus's father, kill the farmer later. And the reason he does that is because he's there to steal all this liquor that he finds out the farmer has there. And there's another man has a real conflict with the farmer over wages, someone who works for him. He comes and this fight starts. The farmer gets out the whip and he knocks out the other man. And at the same time, he sees Booker there stealing from him. So Booker comes out and keeps hitting him over the head and kills him. But it looks as if the other man who was knocked down did it, because sure enough, Booker runs off. And who is left there? One guy with the crowbar that Booker used, knocked out cold, and the other farmer who's dead. So this goes to trial. It looks as if certainly this man killed the farmer, and Newt was there. Newt was working for the farmer, and he was hiding so no one could see him, and he was afraid, naturally. And he's faced with this choice. What do I do? He knows that if he comes out and says Booker did it, that this is going to be consequences for all the black people, or many of them, in the town that they live in, because his father makes a comment at the funeral. It's a good thing it wasn't a black man. And he asks, again, he's young, he's coming of age. He asks someone, what does that mean? Why did my father say that? And he says, well, last time a black man killed a white man, they burnt down a bunch of the black people's houses and hung the man, and there was no trial. And he just thought, oh, great. So in other words, if I tell the truth, we may all suffer from what Booker did. And then if I lie and not say anything, that's also wrong. So there's this beautiful scene. He asks his mother, what do I do? His mother is the one who gave him the advice, tell the truth, even when you feel like lying. And without hesitation, she works for the judge who's on the trial. She says, go and tell the judge that he was there. He takes the witness stand and right away tells the truth. And there's the performance from Richard Ward played Booker. Fantastic performance, as Newt takes the stand and says that he did it, and he just screams out that he's lying. And even the look he gives Newt, like he was just gonna kill him, like really believed his reaction to that. And right away, no one, right away everyone starts saying, grab him, hang him. And because he was so afraid and he knows that he might be hung right away, he commits suicide right there. He takes the cop's gun as they get into a bit of a scuffle, shoots himself in the head. Now, there's this really great moment right there where the judge says he blames everyone for that, because he's like, everybody deserves a fair trial. Yes, this man came forward. The young man said that Booker did it, but he has not been on trial yet. And because of the color of his skin, you all jump to the conclusions that he was certainly guilty and that you wanted to hang him. And so he got so afraid that he killed himself. And he's like, have you not forgotten that a few seconds ago, Newt, a young black man, saved a white man who was about to be basically found guilty of killing the farmer, and he says this should haunt all of you. Now, the earlier scene I was speaking of was also the principal character was similar, because as Newt tells the principal what the teacher said, that he can't go to college because of the color of his skin, you see that the principal, he is aware that this is happening, that black people are being told they can't do a lot of things and that they can only do certain things and that they better stick to those rules, so to speak. And he basically says to Newt, that's my father's fault and his father's fault and his father's fault, and all the teachers there, it's their parents' fault and their parents' fault before them. In other words, this way of thinking, this prejudice is passed down, and we have to now stop and do something about it. So he says he's going to talk to the other teachers. So between the principal and the judge, they are the two white characters who basically are saying this is wrong. We have to basically saying that this racism is appalling and we have to do something about it. And someone on the Criterion channel, the recent featurette where people were talking about the film, he said something interesting. He says because this is autobiographical, he hopes that Gordon Parks actually met white people like that. He hopes that Gordon Parks didn't just invent those characters who were against the racism, but who knows? But all we can do is go on by the story, and those are wonderful, wonderful emotional scenes of someone saying, this is insane, this is crazy, why this is hateful, how can we do this? Later on, as Marcus finds out that his father committed suicide and they tell him that it was Newt that said that Booker killed the farmer, immediately he wants to defend his father and says Newt is lying, and because he already had some conflict with Newt. For example, earlier in the film, after he was being whipped, he and then he knocked the farmer out and punched him a few times. Newt said he shouldn't have done that, and there's the other boys kind of take Newt's side, and he says, there right away there's a riff. A riff begins with them, and then there's this really weird carnival scene where this man has a boxing ring, and he gives some of the kids money to fight each other for as like a spectacle, and to see like all the black young men fighting each other for some money. It was just disgusted me, and people were cheering this on, particularly the sheriff, who was saying, shouting out, kill him. And I just thought, wow, talk about just someone who has no morals or any kind of consciousness whatsoever. And, Newt and Marcus fight last and Newt wins. So, it was boiling to this point where Marcus says, I'm going to now kill Newt. He attacks Newt and they get into this fight, and he cuts him. Newt, being stronger, was able to get him down and had an opportunity to hit him or hurt him or kill him if he wanted to, and he doesn't. He lets him go, actually, because the cop has been cold and is now trying to go and stop it. Marcus is afraid that Kirky's going to kill him, so he says, let me go so I can run, and so he does let him go, but it was too late, and Kirky gets there and kills him. And the irony is that he goes on this rope that they were using to jump into the river. He was also going to go jump into the river and shoots him. I couldn't believe it. I was still, here I am thinking it was going to be somewhat more idealistic because of what the judge had said to everybody about, this should appall all of you. So I thought the cop was going to do one good thing and at least just stop the fight and tell him to go home. But boom, shoots him straight. I thought, how can you justify... Okay, yes, we know that Marcus attacked Newt and surely, tried to kill him. Yes, he should be arrested for that. But to just shoot him, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, and casually. And, then he offers Newt a ride home on his bike. And Newt just says, as the film ends, no thanks, I'm going to find my own way. And I think he's also talking about his own life. I got to find my own way. So it's a little hopeful for him because he's going to move out and go to college somewhere. Things are hopeful for him, but poor Marcus gets shot straight, point blank. It shocked me. I mean, it really shocked me, but I don't know why it should shock me, because I know this happens far too often, and it happens, now, and we see it happening in the news too much. It's sickening. The scene that you see earlier where Booker really stands up to the police officer who calls him boy, and then he says, "I'm going to kill one of them one of these days." I think that was so crucial to, because later on, as he does kill one of them, you can understand why he would do such a thing. Ultimately, it's because of the how much hatred he's had to experience, how much prejudice he's experienced, how many times he's been called boy over and over and over again. Of course, this is going to sometimes often lead to people to want to kill, because when you hate someone so much, it's you're just going to fuel their own hatred towards you. And so obviously I think what Booker did was wrong, and of course he face the consequences. But it's you totally can understand why someone like Booker would make that decision then in the with when he was with the farmer, when the farmer caught him stealing, to knock him over the head and kill him. uh I think it was done with the utmost empathy, so you understand why this violence took place in that scene. And you also see Marcus his son making similar choices with regards to violence. Of course, as when he's met with the farmer hitting him, his first instinct is to hit him harder, hit him more times. And then later on, when he finds out that Newt is the one who said that his Booker killed the farmer, and then Booker killed himself, right away, of course, his instinct is to turn towards violence and say, I'm gonna now kill Newt. You get the impression that his father was violent towards him from the first scene that you see them in. And of course, also when he was in prison, he was getting beaten up by all the white guards and being treated like total garbage and knocked out, and just appalling, uh, atrocious ways of treating someone. So all of when you violence meets violence meets violence, and then will just you can't stop it if you keep teaching it, and if you keep telling people to handle things that way, they're gonna then handle it the exact same way when they are angry. So you certainly see that in this film as well. And I really loved it. Another note I just wanted to make, this is something, again, I can't take credit for this, people saying on the Criterion channel, was every time you really saw the color of red, it was often, the red popped out so much and it was a sign of violence to come. When you saw the red apples early on as they're about to steal them, right after that there's that violent scene with the farmer and the whip and Marcus. Even in the courtroom, Booker is wearing this really bright red shirt as he is pointed out by Newt and then kills himself. And even here, as he's shot in the back, Marcus, as he jumps into the river, or the man early on who was also shot by Clarke, the blood in the water was just really stood out. And I imagine that Gordon wanted to do that because he really wanted the blood to stand out, the violence, for you to feel it, to be shocked by it, and to show that people are so casual about this, and it's all so normal. And why is this normal? So, wow, wonderful, moving portrait again of 1920s coming of age story in Kansas, and racism and police brutality and violence, but with some, wonderful, somewhat optimism at the end, some wonderful relationships, particularly between Newt and his mother. I really love the solid relationship that he had, and how much of an influence his mother was on him. That was really beautiful to see. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I just want to thank everyone who is a member of my Patreon for your ongoing support. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, go to patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. So head over to the link and see the full details on how to become a member there. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to my channel by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo. You will see it floating above my head right here to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release a new video or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.